So Boris Johnson is expected to serve as caretaker Prime Minister in the UK after announcing his resignation as leader of the Conservative Party this week. A former Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, has entered the race to replace him. Now, Sunak's resignation from the cabinet, some say, helped trigger the mass walkout of ministers, which ultimately forced Johnson to step down. But what do the next steps look like? Well, let's speak to political scientist and commentator Jeevun Sandher, who joins us now via our video link. And it's lovely to have you on the program. Thanks very much indeed for making time. So much has been said over the past couple of days. In fact, there's that saying that 24 hours is a long time in politics. Try 1 hour. Let me first get your take on Boris Johnson's exit. Good riddance or a distraction from the real issues, as it were?
I mean, look, Boris Johnson is one of the worst prime ministers this country has ever had. You know, first and foremost, he lied to the British people. And in a democracy, we cannot have our leaders lie to us. That undermines our consent for democratic governance. Secondly, he appointed a man who's effectively his deputy chief whip, his deputy head of HR, who he knew to be he knew allegations of sexual assault, perhaps repeated sexual assault. And finally, and most seriously, of course, told people in the UK they couldn't see their dying parents, their dying children, their dying partners, while he himself partied in Downing Street. So certainly will go down one of the worst prime ministers this country has ever had. Unfortunately, on the other side, we do face a set of huge issues and, in fact, multiple crises coming down the road. A cost of living crisis, I'm sure you're all feeling that in South Africa as well. Pay cut crisis, and on top of that, of course, our Brexit crisis created by Boris Johnson.
Given those crises, I presume it's not ideal really to be having a leadership change, especially at that level.
It's definitely not ideal. We need this problem to be dealt with now, not over the summer, not to wait 3 months' time. But unfortunately, we are going to have to wait that long. It looks like until September, although the rules haven't been finalised yet for the Conservatives to choose a new leader. But we absolutely need a new Prime Minister right now.
Yeah, in fact, some of his now former cabinet ministers actually pushing for him not to even serve as caretaker Prime Minister. Some saying he's got this orbit around him. I think the exact words used were a magnetic field of chaos. How much can he really do as caretaker as we count down to September?
As caretaker, he'll have his options to be incredibly constrained, very difficult for him to do anything at all. He does not have a mandate from his own party. His own party will stop him passing any major legislation or making any policy announcements. And the civil servants themselves at this point will also probably enter a period of what we call purdah, where they will refuse to do things that the Prime Minister ask. They're huge policy changes. So really, he is a caretaker Prime Minister. He is very much now in power and name, but certainly not in actuality.
Yeah, in fact, my understanding is that at the time of this resignation, or let's call it chaos, there had actually been plans within Parliament to introduce some kind of bill that would rip apart, those are the words being used, part of the Brexit deal. How much of those plans can go ahead now, given this interim moment?
That's a very good question. That's very much up in the air. So there could be a case to say that that legislation has already started. The mandate is going forward. Ideally, of course, you'd put a pause on all of that and say, look, we have to fix our relationships with the European Union. They are our biggest trading partner, and all this uncertainty is causing a huge amount of economic damage to the United Kingdom. Our investment rates in the UK down 10% on pre-pandemic levels. If you compare it to countries near us in terms of their size and in terms of their wealth, the US, France, South Korea, their investment levels up by 20% on pre-pandemic levels. Brexit is harming us in this country. We need to get it done and get a deal over the line.
Yeah, interestingly enough, the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak, among those people, and I say this because I presume more people will come forward, among those people who've put their names forward to try and replace Boris Johnson. But wasn't this the guy who was also sanctioned for breaking lockdown regulations? You'll correct me if I'm wrong. And if that's the case, I mean, what are the chances of his success?
So I think with him, he certainly was sanctioned on lockdown regulations, but it looks like it's not casting a long shadow over his leadership campaign. In the case of the Chancellor, what happened was he went to a meeting 10 minutes early, and then they had a birthday party for the Prime Minister, and he then got sanctioned. So it doesn't seem to have that much of a political pull or pulling him back. In terms of his chances, they are good, but look, this is an election for an individual within a party. They're incredibly unpredictable. Who knows who's going to make the final two or the leadership ballot for the members. So just to be clear to our listeners, what happens is the Conservative MPs will choose 2 candidates, and those 2 candidates will then go to the wider Conservative Party membership. And who they are and who it ends up being, I don't know, but I do know Rishi Sunak does have a good chance.
All right. There's also been a lot of talk around this 1922 committee. I don't want to assume that our audience knows what that committee can and can't do. So explain that for us and why their role is important.
So the 1922 committee is the backbench committee of Conservative MPs, and they were the ones who, for example, helped to organise the confidence vote in Boris Johnson. They were also the group who could have kind of got rid of him very recently, could have changed the rules, and now they'll also decide what the leadership timetable is going to be. So the current timetable is that this entire process will end in early September to have a Prime Minister in place by then, but they may or may not change their mind, and they may decide how many people could be on the ballot. With over 10 people kind of coming forward to come on the ballot, it looks like they might try and change the rules to restrict that in some way. We'll see what happens when they meet in the coming days and decide on a timetable.
Such interesting times. Jeevun Sandher, thanks very much indeed for helping us connect the dots here in South Africa. Really appreciate your speaking to us. Jeevun is a political scientist and commentator. Live to us there from London.